Hey everyone, I'm Melissa from Knitting the Stash, and this is episode 156 in the series. Welcome back to the Yarn Room. It is a quiet Saturday morning. I'm very thankful for that because everything that was promised in the last episode came to pass. There was celebration, there was family, there was travel, there was a whirlwind of things at work and otherwise, and so I'm glad to just have a little bit of quiet here on Saturday to hang out with you guys. If you're coming back, thanks for coming back. It's great to see you. Thanks for sticking with the podcast and hanging out in the Ravelry group and leaving comments and hanging out on the Saturday Zoom and all those wonderful things. It's great to have this community. I love it. It inspires me all the time. So I'm glad you're here. And if you're new to the podcast, this is usually a cast about sweater design, modification, and I have a couple of dogs. So now you know. They're wandering around. They're opening doors. I think they're like the raptors in Jurassic Park sometimes. They're just like very able to do a lot of things in the house that kind of undermine our authority. So anyway, welcome to the podcast. Today I do have a sweater, which I finished, and we're going to talk about it. This episode's kind of all about solutions because in the last episode, I was stuck on a couple of different questions about this sweater, and they've all been solved. I also have the perfect solution for those of you who don't like to knit socks with your random skeins of variegated yarn. I have the perfect solution for you for that one. And I have a cute little needle felted creature. So I went from 2D needle felting to 3D needle felting, and I'm pretty excited to talk to you about that. If you are looking for me, you can find me just about everywhere as Knitting the Stash. So obviously here on YouTube, over on Ravelry, on Instagram, and on the website, the main website. knittingthestash.com. That is where the Flock Farm Yarn Shop is, where I feature indie yarn and fiber from across the United States. And my online classes are over there, and there's just lots of just fun stuff. It's my fun website. So check out knittingthestash.com if you're looking for me. And I have to thank the podcast producers. So this is the January thank you to the wonderful podcast producers over on Patreon. That's Lenore, Jennifer, Rose, Erika, Nargis, and Kendra. Thanks so much for supporting the podcast. You guys are awesome. Appreciate you very much. And if you're interested in getting involved in the Patreon support or in Ko-fi, there's links below in the description. So thanks ahead of time, and thanks to those of you who have already sent your support and your kind comments and shared and all those things that help with this kind of thing. Yeah. So I think we'll just jump right in to sweater knitting because that's what I do primarily. And at the end, for those of you who are interested, I will talk a little bit about the craze of the last couple of weeks. The travel I dropped off our youngest for his study abroad in London. At the end, I'll try to save a little bit of time to talk about that. But I'm going to jump into the sweaters right away. So I had to leave this sweater because I was traveling and I didn't want to lug it around with me. So I took a smaller project with me for that whole week I was gone. So this lingered with one sleeve left for a whole week in my project bag at home, but it is finished. And a lot of the questions I had about this sweater have now been answered. I have solved the problem, so I wanted to tell you a little bit about them. This is the Turntable Pullover by Albina McLaughlin, and if you haven't worked on one of Albina's patterns before, I encourage you to do so. She's an excellent knitwear designer out of Ireland. She produces really interesting pieces, and there's actually a new sweater coming out. I think it's called the 6x2 pullover. It has this really cool detail on the shoulder. Anyway, I love her patterns. I've been working with her for years. She's actually lent her pattern to the beginning modification class that I teach online. So we have a wonderful working relationship. I love her patterns. I encourage you to check them out. This is the Turntable Pullover. I think this one came out maybe a year or two ago, and I've been wanting to knit it. And this is a gift knit, actually. So my daughter-in-law requested a sweater, and since I have a bin of sweaters, I'm very happy to provide sweaters for other people sometimes, if they're gift worthy, which she is. So she requested, it's one of those things where when you're gift knitting, you get a brief, kind of what does the person want? Are we talking colors? Are we talking ribbing? Are we talking style, length, all the different things about sweaters. And so you're also just kind of flying blind and you just hope for the best. So at least this sweater, I think, meets her brief, which was a kind of classic sweater she could wear with skirts and pants. She said crew neck or turtleneck. She liked this kind of coloring, like a charcoal gray, kind of muted color. We got all the sizing right. So at least we've met the brief. I've met the brief for this one. And I tried it on myself. She's very close to my size. And I like the way the fit is working out. It's just one of those sweaters that, like, when you put it on, it's like, it just seems timeless, which I think is kind of cool. It's like a wardrobe staple, which is something that Albina has been focusing on in the last couple of years with her design. So I talked a lot about this one in the last episode, and you can go back there and check out, you know, some of the initial stages of this. I think I had it to about here. There was a quasi neck on there. There were no sleeves. You know, it was, we were at a point where we were trying to figure out some things. So here's what I ended up doing. This, the neck, let's talk about the neck, because that was the one place, you know, there were some issues. Initially with this sweater, I wasn't sure about the neckline, so I actually cast on right above the lateral braid that makes up the division between the main body and the neck of the sweater, and then I worked the lateral braid, and then I just worked down. So it didn't have a neck for a very long time. Eventually I picked up stitches and tried doing like a mock turtleneck, so it was about this high, so about a couple of inches, but it wasn't turned, it was just straight up. And I used a different size needle. I tried a 2x2 or 2x1 ribbing pattern. I wasn't, you know, it was just very experimental, and you can see it in the last video if you're interested. What I ended up doing is taking that out and putting in what looks like the original neck. These are the things that happen sometimes with knitting. You try something, it doesn't work out, you go back to the original, but with a little bit of a twist, I'd say. So the original obviously starts here and works down. I had already cast on here, so I ended up picking up my stitches and working up for the neck. Totally cool, and a really interesting thing to do with your knitting if you've, you can do this in other places in your sweaters. So sometimes people will cast on at the underarm and work provisionally so they can work the yoke or the main body of the sweater. You cast on provisionally for your sleeves. You know, there are all these different places where you can kind of work a sweater up and down in different directions to try out different things, right? So with a neckline like this, you could take the neck off, not have a neck, do all kinds of experiments with it to see what's going on before you have a neck, if you work in that direction. Now, the tricky thing with this sweater, one of the things I was trying to experiment with was whether or not I could turn it into a crew neck. And I talked to Albina a little bit on Instagram about this, and she had some great suggestions, but they pretty much involved changing some of the shaping for the sweater at this point, which I was already, by that point, all the way down, past the bust, I think. So when I tried the mock turtleneck, I tried a crew neck. The neckline of this is really almost like, you can see, it's almost like a boat neck. It's fairly wide on the shoulders. And it doesn't quite work for a crew the way that it is here. So that's why I ended up going with the full turtleneck. Once I put the turtleneck on it, the whole sweater kind of relaxed a little bit. What I was trying to do was kind of cinch it up too much, and the front was sitting too high. Even though it has short rows in the back to raise the back neck, when I was trying to force it into crew shape, the front neck was sitting kind of high on me when I would try it on. Once I put the turtleneck on, the whole thing just relaxed, and it was perfect, as it was intended to be when Albina designed it. So there you go. I did not do a different kind of ribbing, and I did go down one needle size, but I kept the 3x1 ribbing, and I did that for the whole sweater. So I kind of like this mod a lot. The whole sweater is in a 3x1 rib, and then once you do these lateral braids, you're kind of supposed to be doing a different ribbing for the cuffs and the hem, and then, you know, when you would put the turtleneck on. And I wasn't super happy with the idea of the different ribbing, and I had tried it with that mock turtleneck. So what I ended up doing is just putting on the lateral braid and then working the 3x1 ribbing again in the turtleneck and in the cuffs and on the hem, so that it just looks like a continuation of the sweater. Now, the reason that that's okay with the sweater is because it's already ribbing, so it's not stockinette, it's not guarded, it doesn't want to roll. You know, it wants to sit flat. So you can use your lateral braid as a kind of demarcation, a space, a line in time that shows people visually where the sweater is coming to an end. You know, it serves the same kind of purpose as switching to a different kind of ribbing on a stockinette sweater or something like that. But in the end, you're just repeating the 3x1 ribbing underneath the lateral braid. And so it just kind of gives this nice sense of continuity, I think, in both the hem the turtleneck and in the sleeve cuffs. So that was the biggest mod I did. And then I did do a tubular cast off, bind off for the sleeves and the hem and the neckline. So all of these have that kind of tubular bind off. And I did a kind of modified bind off where I used one row where I switched from 3x1 ribbing to 1x1 ribbing, which is pretty easy with 3x1 because it's divisible by 4. So you can do, or by 2, so that you just switch that middle stitch to a purl stitch. So it's very easy to do a tubular bind off if you have the 1x1 ribbing. So that's what I switched it to. And then once I did that row, I worked my two setup rows for the tubular bind off. So the first round, I think I knit the knits and slipped the purls, and the second round I purled the purls and slipped the knits, and then just put them both on, the purls on one side and the knits on the other, and grafted them together using Kitchener in the end. So that's what happens effectively when you do that tubular bind off. You're basically splitting your knitting into 2 kind of pieces, and then you're grafting it back together this way so that it looks continuous, if that makes sense. So I did that with the hem, the cuffs, and the top of the turtleneck, and I like the result. I think it just looks very classic, very finished. Yeah, it's just neat. I like neatness. The armpits, of course, I did the provisional cast on, which I always talk about on here. So provisionally cast on for the main body, and then was able to pick up and continue in pattern. You see the 3x1 ribbing. There's no break in the pattern, which is one of the wonderful things about provisional cast-ons. You don't have to bind off and then pick up, the stitches are already there. Yeah, and then the other thing I did with the sweater, and I think I talked about this last time, is that I went for A-line shaping, which is not part of the original pattern, but Albina has A-line shaping options in most of her patterns, or I shouldn't say most. A lot of her patterns have an option for A-line shaping. So I just worked the size for a 36-inch bust here. And then once I was about an inch past the division for the sleeves, I just started working increases in the body. And you can see I did them kind of in pattern here. I hope you can see that on the camera. And I talked a little bit about this last time. So just basically, since it's 3x1 ribbing, if you add your stitches in kind of in between your rows here, you can see it just kind of turns into almost like a repeating triangle as it kind of spreads itself out all the way down to the bottom, but you don't really notice it because of the ribbing pattern and because you're increasing kind of in pattern, which I think is kind of cool. I did the same thing, and I've left all my pins on so you could see. I did the same thing with the sleeves. Tink is over there having a little fit. So with the sleeves, I did the same thing, except it was with decreases. So I was decreasing down to create a smaller cuff, and I just worked them within that pattern of the ribbing so that they kind of like merge together. So a lot of really interesting finishing techniques, interesting techniques in terms of trying to maintain the pattern with this sweater. They were really interesting and fun to do. I did knit this out of the Ramagarn yarn, which I think it's a 2-ply. It's a little felty, a little fuzzy. It's a little toothy. It softens up really nicely when you wash it. I washed part of this sweater when I was working on the turtleneck, so I have a sense of like what it feels like washed. The upper part has been soaked, and it just softens really beautifully. The other thing, and I think I mentioned this last time, about working a ribbed sweater like this for a gift knit, which is kind of cool, is that there's a lot of options. There's a lot of leeway, right? So if she wanted to wear this sweater as it is, if this ends up fitting her this way without a whole lot of like blocking, then that's great. If she ends up wanting it to be a little bit looser or have more ease, she can block it, and this is how it's intended to be, is to be blocked way out. But there's a lot of flexibility there. So with a gift knit, it's kind of nice. I mean, I have her measurements, and I did the sweater to her measurements, but people, when you put a sweater on, sometimes you might tug at it, you might want it to be a little looser, a little tighter, however you feel, that day. And the nice thing about wool, 100% wool, is that you can wash it and block it, especially if it's ribbed like this. It's not like a stockinette fabric. Stockinette stretches to a certain extent, but a ribbed fabric, I mean, you can really get some stretch out of that. So she'll be able to wash it and block it to whatever spec she wants, which I think is kind of cool. So yeah, so this is the turntable pullover. It ends up looking a little bit like a dropped shoulder here. I think you can see that in the light, just because of the way Albina does the increases here, which I just love all the details of this sweater. It's a really beautiful sweater. Create this cool triangle. It looks a little bit like a dropped shoulder. It's got a lot of style, but it's very understated, and so I'm a fan. I'm a fan of this sweater. Yeah, I like it a lot. I'm excited. I haven't washed the full thing yet, so you can see it's got a little crinkle on the bottom here where the lateral braid is. I want to wash it, block it, and then package it up and send it off to Erin. Hopefully she will like it and wear it, and if not, we'll try again, because that's what sweater knitting is all about. So, turntable pullover, Albina McLaughlin. Highly recommend. And if you don't dig this pattern, she has tons of other less retro-y kind of looking patterns. Yeah, I think I'm going to be knitting. I have another one to talk about with you guys that I've already knit, and then for a test knit, and then there's that new 6x2 that's coming out that I'm super excited about. So yeah. Now I promised you a bunch of solutions, and here's your next solution. So I know a lot of you are sock knitters. On our Saturday Zoom, there's often a lot of ladies on there doing sock knitting. But for those of you who may not be a huge fan of sock knitting, like myself, I like socks. I don't like the small circumference all the time. I'll do small circumference for sleeves, and I'll do small circumference for toys and things like that. But for socks, it doesn't grab me as much. So I have a lot of skeins of variegated yarn in my stash. And I've been looking for things to do with them, you know, that I could just kind of continually take with me on little trips in waiting rooms when traveling, things like that. And I think you all know this pattern by now. It's something I've been meaning to make for a long time, and I finally got around to it. This is the Musselburgh Hat by Isolde Teague, knit out of a single skein of hedgehog fibers, just a random potluck. It didn't really have a colorway. It was just one of those throw dye in the pot and see what you get. But you can see that it has some beautiful blues and kind of golds, purples. It's a really beautiful palette of colors. So Musselburgh, you can take this with you. I put it in the tiniest bag for my travel. So I had it with me in the flat in London. I had it on the plane, and it's a big enough circumference that you're not kind of constantly having to change your needles around. You're able to knit for quite a while and then switch your needle to the next bit or whatever. And it's a simple pattern. So yes, you're working a pinhole cast on, and then you're working your increases. But for a very long time, you're just knitting stockinette, because this is a hat that is a lined hat. It's a double hat. And so from this point to about this point, you're just knitting in the round in stockinette, like you would be for a sock, if it's just a plain sock. And you can use your variegated yarn, and it just takes one skein of variegated yarn, and you get a hat out of it at the end, which I really love. And so you can tell it's kind of like a big tube that's closed at both ends. And when you tuck one end inside the other, obviously that's what the design is about. I've worn mine out a couple times now, and it's warm, which is great. I'm often wearing two hats outside when we walk the dogs in the morning because it's just so cold. But this one has, obviously it's double. And then if you want to, you can wear it like that. But if you want to, like me, you can fold up that brim, and then it's like the perfect ear cover for your head. So if you've got those variegated skeins lying around, and I'm looking at you, Stash, I'm going to be knitting a lot of these hats. I've already cast on another one for Spencer, and this is the adult medium. It fits my head very well. I'm going to you'll see. It's great. Love this hat. It's just like the perfect depth, and you can adjust all of that when you're knitting it. So if you wanted to make it the adult medium but make it longer, so you could like tuck it in the back or something, you just increase that span between your increases and your decreases to make it as long as you want, so that you can fold it up and make it, your own hat. The other thing about the pattern, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of if you've been knitting Musselburghs for a while, is that Isolde gives you tons of different options for gauge. So if you have a bunch of variegated skeins in sock yarn, not all sock yarn is equal, like not all fingering weight yarn is equal. We've talked about that before. And so she gives you a gauge, and you check your gauge basically after. You don't have to do a swatch, you don't have to wash anything. It's like very simple. You just do your increases, and then once you have enough fabric, you know, in one of these places in between your increases, you measure about 1 inch or 2 and get your gauge, and then you just, you know, there's a chart in the pattern, will tell you how many stitches you need to get to. It's just simple like that. So you could do this with a fingering weight yarn, you can do it with a DK weight yarn, even like a sport weight yarn, and the pattern is just, it's just a bunch of different, very simple pattern, but then there are a bunch of different kind of tables that give you stitch counts for, you know, depending on what your gauge is. So I'm a fan. I'm a huge convert. Will always probably have one of these in my travel knitting bag from here on out. And I'm pretty excited to go through a bunch of my skeins of yarn. I think Aaron and Phineas and all the kids are going to get like a lot of hats. My whole family is going to get a lot of hats. And maybe we'll give some away. I don't know. They're great project, warm, easy to knit, easy to follow, and it's a solution, right? For travel knitting and for all those skeins of yarn that I have lying around waiting for a project. Yeah. All right, the last thing for today's episode is that I made a switch. Not switch. I've branched out, let's say. So I was doing a bunch of 2D needle felting, and I was showing you all, you know, my different landscapes, and I was really enjoying it and getting a sense of, you know, perspective and how to do the different layers. And I took a class, an online class on wet felting landscapes that's available at livingfelt.com. Living Felt is great. Another wonderful, small, woman-owned business. Totally support them. And they have a bunch of felting classes. So I took a felting class there and learned a lot about how to wet felt some of those landscapes I've been working on. So I've done another landscape. I'm waiting to wet felt it. I've, you know, got all the tools. I'm pretty excited. But Spencer also got me a couple of kits for 3-dimensional needle felting. And so I want to introduce you to Mr. Fiddles. I think Mr. Fiddles is absolutely adorable. This was also a kit from Living Felt, where basically you get a bunch of like raw wool, not raw, it's cleaned, but it's different kinds of wool. So some's roving, some's top, you know, different things like that in a little kit, just in these colors. So you get, you know, the white, you get the core wool, which is a kind of cream color, the black, the gray, a little bit of pink, you get the little glass eyes. And then there's a video tutorial that goes along with like how to make it. I was really impressed that I was able to create Mr. Fiddles as like my first 3D needle felting guy. Like he actually looks kind of cool. I'm tooting my own horn here. So he even has a little articulating head. I had to get a doll needle so that I could sew his head to his body, which was cool. And Jean from Saturday Zoom, I know you make a lot of dolls, so this was a cool experience for me, and I was glad to have known you and seen your doll making a little bit before getting into this. And then the arms and legs are pipe cleaners covered in wool, so they are bendable, like you can make him do his little wave. Same with the tail. And everything is just attached to the body. These guys are just actually felted to the body, the arms and the legs and the tail. Same with the ears, they're just felted onto the head. So yeah, adorable, right? So I'm thinking of branching out now and creating a lot more little adorable creatures, because you know how I feel about knitting toys, like knitted toys. So this is like adorable. I can think of 10 million possibilities. I got I got a couple of books. One is the Wool Buddies book, which I used to look at and think, oh, I could never do that. And now I'm like, oh, I could totally do that. It's so much fun. So this is all by way of saying, get out there and try. If there's some other fiber craft that you've been wanting to try, spinning, weaving, tatting, needle felting, whatever it is, crochet, try it. See if you like it. See if you can, you know, produce things that make you happy, because it's really fun to do something different and to feel that like creative, the creative like spirit come out again. So yeah, I feel like he needs a little bow tie. We're in like a gray mode today. I feel like he needs a little bow tie. I was also thinking I should knit him a little sweater. So Mr. Fiddles might get some clothing. He might just get a bow tie. He might get some friends, right? I mean, like Mr. Fiddles surely shouldn't be alone in this world. So yeah, I'll give you the three-dimensional, the total turnaround here on Mr. Fiddles. And yeah, so that's what I've been up to. He's not a solution, but he's like a creative, fun. He's a solution to my creative ennui sometimes. You know, little needle-felted creatures. They're wonderful. Yeah. So that's it for today's episode. Lots of making. And I promised a little travel update for those of you who are wondering. So when I was in London, I was dropping off our youngest for his study abroad for next semester, this semester now. And it was basically, he's staying in East London at a flat, and we were the first ones to get there. He's living with a couple of his friends. And yeah, we just went out there together, tried to set up the flat a little bit, you know, basically like find blankets and pillows, which were very hard to find, kitchen knives, you know, like laundry soap, food, you know, the basic stuff. So he's very well appointed. He's got, you know, everything set up. He knows where to go. He's good on the tubes. He's like ready to take London by storm. And I think he's actually at a Chelsea game this weekend. So he's just taking it all in. And I'm glad I got to go out there with him. It was a little bit of a whirlwind to Europe trip, but I've done a lot of those for work before, where you go for a week and you barely get over the jet lag before you get back on the plane and come home. So that was part of what was going on. And then, you know, tons of work swirly stuff for like the beginning of the semester. I'm teaching a graduate class on data feminism. And so I had to get all that ready and just a bunch of servicey stuff. Anyway, life is coming back to normal. So I'm hoping to be back up here to make some more videos for you all soon and get back to the Saturday Zoom. If you're interested in the Saturday Zoom, knittingthestash@gmail.com. Drop me a line. I will get you the Zoom info for that. Come join us. We'd love to have you. And I think that's it. I'm going to get this washed and shipped off, knit some more Musselburgh hats, and I'll see you all in the next cast. Take care. Bye-bye.